the USA Freedom Act. Like, if there was ever a proper use for the term Orwellian, this is it. But that passed, and that's part of a reauthorization of the Patriot Act, which is, this Orwell is just coming up all the time. That passed without an internet surveillance ban. And so there was an amendment to this bill that would say that, okay, the government can only spy on your internet history if they have a warrant, right? And that was like, that's such
it's common sense.
Yeah. Like, why should the internet be able to spy on my internet history without a warrant? And that amendment failed, and it passed by, and the Freedom Act passed. The amendment failed by one vote. Bernie Sanders did not vote, and both of Alabama's senators voted against this bill. Yeah. Doug Jones and Richard Shelby both believe that the government should have the right to your unrestricted to your internet history without a warrant, and that is as un-American as I've ever heard, and they ought to get an earful for it.
Yeah, we need to talk about this more on the next side.
All right. This is the Valley Labor Report. We'll be back in a minute.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Rolling stones of the rap game, not bragging. Look bigger than Jagger, not sagging. Roll it backwards, I'ma leave it at that. That ain't got nothing to do with rap. Giant bats expose those cats. Who pose as heroes, take advantage of blacks. The government's gangsters will cook the crap. A war going on.
Welcome back to the Valley Labor Report with your hosts, David Story and Jacob Morrison. My name is Jacob. When we left off, we were talking about how the USA Freedom Act. I can't say that name without getting furious.
The Freedom Act.
The Freedom Act passed without an internet surveillance ban.
Thank God government is protecting our freedoms.
Thank the Lord.
Yes.
Thank goodness. Yeah. And how both of Alabama's senators, Richard Shelby and Doug Jones, voted against an amendment that would have required the government to get a warrant to spy on your computer.
What? All of these conservatives talking about
small
government.
Yeah.
We need, and here we are, man. And what's going on? What is going on out there? And the House is going. Thank God it's got a chance to go back to the House. That gives everybody just a little bit more time. I mean, I know it's hard to believe, but it gives everybody a little bit more time to reach out to your House of Representatives and tell them, do not support this bill. This has been going on since 9/11. Yeah. And it's just an overreach of big government.
Yeah. And, it's worth mentioning that all of this government overreach, all of this warrantless surveillance on American citizens is the result of the aftermath of 9/11, where 3,000 Americans died in a terrorist attack. And we're looking at and it was a bipartisan thing, this infringement on our freedoms, that has been now 2 decades in the making and unrelenting and continuously growing and snaking into our lives deeper and deeper and deeper ever since 9/11. And, the same folks who led the charge against our freedoms are now complaining that they can't get a haircut.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a perfect example of where one of those other issues to where if we would quit calling people liberals and quit calling people conservatives and quit throwing mud from each side, and I'm not talking about politicians, I'm talking about us, workers.
Right.
If we would quit this divisiveness and come together on issues that we can come together on, we could get these things done.
Exactly. You talk to any just normal average worker and ask them, if, do you reckon the government should be able to spy on you without a warrant? They'd say no.
Yeah. Who
no.
in their right mind is who sitting at their computer or their phone right now thinks that the FBI should be able to watch what you are doing right now and, without any oversight whatsoever.
Right. And I've heard people like, oh, well, if you're not hiding anything, then what's the big deal? And it's like, man, good Lord. Like, I don't have to justify myself to say that, to defend my right to freedom and privacy. And
Yeah.
and you know
that's fascist. That's fascism in its face. If you're not hiding anything, what's the big deal? That sounds exactly like Nazi Germany. Show me your papers. If you hadn't got anything to hide, then you shouldn't have a problem showing me your papers.
And this is the problem with, you know, the way that our government is set up, is that almost no one supports this limitless, warrantless surveillance on people, but almost every politician supports it in both parties. It's just it's a bipartisan. This is just the DC consensus, and no one questions it. And you know, these big defense contractors are making a killing on it. CEOs are making millions of dollars, and they're donating to Democrat and Republican campaigns, and it's just a mess.
And you're not going to hear this kind of talk on a conservative talk radio show. You're not going to hear this kind of talk on liberal media.
No.
You're going to hear this talk on worker radio, the ones where we come together and fight against not left, not right, but the entire system in general.